Welcome to this Oxford Analytica video briefing. My name's William Attwell and I'm here with my fellow Africa analyst colleague Hannah Waddilove. Today will be speaking about the recent Ebola outbreak in West Africa. So Hannah, please update us on the latest figures and fatalities in this tragic outbreak.
So we received some new figures yesterday from the World Health Organization, the WHO. The death rate is nearing up to 5,000 now. We're still talking about a pandemic in 3 particular countries in West Africa. That is Liberia, the worst affected, followed by Sierra Leone and then Guinea. Cases are also estimated to be around nearing the 10,000 mark, but it's really important to say that the other side of this story is that this is probably grossly underreported. This information comes from ministries of health in the 3 affected countries that are obviously under huge strain. So the key message at the moment is a pandemic in 3 particular countries. The infection rates continue to rise as far as we know. We're not plateauing yet and we're certainly not going down yet.
And the World Health Organization held a meeting yesterday to discuss the current response, and the global response has come under some criticism, both for its slow speed and also the scale of some of the contributions that have been made by donor countries and multilateral agencies. Talk us through the response to date and where you see things going.
So WHO's main kind of roadmap at the moment is a 90-day roadmap. So the first milestone for that, which will be a useful one for both us and our clients, is the 1st of December of this year. By that time, the WHO, who are now actually crucially working with a new UN mission that's been based in Accra in Ghana, hope to have isolated 70% of the cases. They also hope to have buried the bodies of 70% of these cases, because this is still a huge problem. And by the 1st of January, the second milestone, they hope that will be up to 100%. This includes both treatment centres that are being set up sort of in parallel to the non-existent health systems in this country, along with some more community-based care as well. So those are the key deadlines to look out for if we want sort of an inflection point on where this is going in 60 and then 90 days' time.
Of course, the great fear is that the outbreak could spread beyond those 3 countries. We already know that, sort of officially at least, Nigeria has been declared Ebola-free. But what are the risks of this spreading significantly beyond West Africa? We've heard about infections in the United States and in Spain, but is this really a global pandemic that people should be worried about?
Well, I'm going to use a great quote here from a man named Larry Brilliant, who was very key to eradicating smallpox. And his quote is that outbreaks are inevitable, but pandemics are optional. And I think that's a really key message with this particular Ebola outbreak. As you've mentioned, Nigeria has been declared Ebola-free. That was on Monday of this week. And there are a few factors to bear in mind about why this has got quite so bad in the 3 countries affected. First of all, it was spreading before anyone even knew about it. WHO were very, very slow off the mark, as you've mentioned, to declare it a problem, which they only did in March. Secondly, particularly in Liberia, Sierra Leone, we're dealing with post-conflict countries, very recent post-conflict countries that really effectively have no health infrastructure. Liberia in particular was estimated to have 200 doctors before this crisis, which makes about 1 doctor per 100,000 people in a population of 5 million. Secondly, along with the post-conflict situation in these countries, Liberia, Sierra Leone, you have a distrust of the state, and also leadership were very slow off the mark to admit this was a problem. What we've seen in Nigeria and Senegal to some extent, although that was only 1 case, Nigeria is a better example of how states can mobilise to stop this. Pandemics are in no way inevitable on this scale. We've seen the same in the United States and we've seen the same in Spain so far. The 2 key kind of elements that you need are, 1, to be able to isolate cases. Developed world health infrastructures have that capacity without even preparing for it in the main. And secondly, you need to be able to have the capacity to contact trace. This is what Nigeria did very, very well, very effectively, and this is what the United States and Spain have been doing. Saying that, so long as the pandemic continues in these 3 countries, obviously the region is going to be at risk, perhaps particularly Ivory Coast and particularly Mali. But what we've seen so far suggests that the sort of second-tier risks are certainly less than what is happening in the 3 affected countries.
Speaking of second and third tier risks, I'd like to move on, if we may, to talk about some of the economic implications of the outbreak. There have obviously been reports of investment conferences cancelled in the region, tourist numbers down, flights cancelled. There was some significant market volatility a couple of days back. But what are some of the secondary and third tier economic knock-on effects, if you will?
So to put this in context in terms of the countries affected, they are collectively worth 0.08% of sub-Saharan African GDP overall. So they are not very significant despite the huge tragedy that's occurring there. But the thing that we're really watching for, and that may only become clear in quantitative terms after this crisis is over, is the effects of aversion behaviour. That is, economic decision makers, whether we're talking about governments, whether we're talking about firms, or whether we're talking about just tourist travellers to the region, making decisions on the basis of perceived risk, even if that is not really based in reality. To give a kind of historical example, 80 to 90% of the economic effects of the SARS outbreak in 2002-04, the H1N1 outbreak in 2009, 80 to 90% of the economic effects were estimated to be linked to this kind of aversion behaviour. So far in the region, obviously there have been events cancelled, and that I imagine will continue. We've seen some kind of retail demand in Lagos go down on account of the Nigeria case. But what we'll be watching for in terms of whether this virus spreads, the Ivory Coast and Ghana are very important in terms of cocoa production, and there is also a slight worry that the lack of geographic knowledge about this continent, outside of it at least, is going to skew some of these effects quite severely. But we really will have to wait and see. It's very, very difficult to estimate quantitatively, but we'll be watching for this.
So on the economic front, we're talking about principally a regional crisis.
I wouldn't say we're talking about a regional crisis. We're just watching to see what sort of decisions are being made. I mean, at the moment, everyone's being very cautious. Nestle, for example, involved in cocoa production, are talking about being prepared. We've got miners working in Sierra Leone, Liberia on iron ore projects that have been somewhat affected, but there's obviously a global context there of iron ore prices, so it's difficult to disaggregate. We do think that there will be an effect, but we'll have to wait to see its scale.
The Ebola crisis is by no means over.
No, it is not.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us for this video briefing today. We look forward to seeing you next time.